Everyone, I'm just going to take you through the lecture from the Roman Republic and the government of the United States today. Please make sure that you complete any of the writings, and notice that the learning goal is asking you to compare and contrast. Therefore, I'd recommend incorporating that into your notes in some way. For your warm-up, you're going to review the work from yesterday on Chapter 7, Lesson 1, in an effort to try and ensure that you fully understand how Rome is formed and how Rome grows into eventually the Republic and Empire that we're going to be talking about today. This is just a quick timeline, and I wanted you to see Rome is founded here, 753 BCE. This is the story of Romulus and Remus, and they fight, and Romulus wins because it's named Rome and not Rheme. Rome is then going to become a republic in 509 BCE. They get rid of a king, King Tarquinius, and this is an important point because today we're going to draw a lot of comparisons between the Republic of Rome and the Democratic Republic of the United States of America. Both of them are going to get rid of a king, and they're going to push themselves to try and ensure that they don't see that same level of stagnant thought coming from one particular family of rulers or one particular ruler in and of himself. So 509 BCE, it becomes a republic. To put things into perspective and some historical context, 480 BCE, that's the Battle of Marathon that we talked about with ancient Greece. 323 is Alexander the Great, and then Hannibal is going to invade Italy here in the Second Punic War that was mentioned in the previous class as well. From there, the Republic will change and evolve over time. It is not just the same way. Even though we're going to take a look at the overall structure of it, it does not exist in a vacuum. It doesn't stay that way the entire time. Eventually, 27 BCE, we will see how the Roman Republic ends as we move through the rest of this unit. Roman Republic and U.S. government, they're going to be very similar. We want to point out those similarities, and we also want to consider how some of these things are going to affect the way that the United States government works today. So first of all, there's one president of the United States. That president, there's one of them at a time, chosen by the people, sort of. It's the Electoral College, and we can get into a debate about whether the Electoral College has outlived its use at another time, but that concept, that idea is that the people have a hand in electing the president. The president serves a 4-year term or is elected to a 4-year term. That president can serve up to 2 terms without having to wait. We know that Grover Cleveland served 2 non-consecutive terms, so that's a possibility as well. Within those 2 terms, the president can also serve more than that if the president serves as vice president first and somehow gains office. The sitting president dies or resigns or something along those lines. Powers of the president, these are just a couple of them, a couple of the major ones. Number 1, veto power over any of the bills that come from Congress. Veto means I deny in Latin, and we'll see why that's important in a moment. Commander-in-Chief, the head of the armed forces, working in conjunction with the Joint Chiefs of Staff to determine what is the best course of action for the American military. Working with the leaders of the other nations, we call that being a chief diplomat. And that is just a few of those are just a few of the powers of the presidential office. And we want to be able to compare and contrast that with the head of state for ancient Rome, the consuls. We know from the previous class that there are 2 of them at one time, and they're chosen of the Senate and by the Senate. And this means that they are coming from the Senate, which is held by patricians, which means the consuls are going to be patricians, at least initially. These consuls were served 1-year terms. Again, we're seeing limits on the amount of time that these heads of state can serve in order to show a difference between that and, say, a monarchy, trying to limit the absolute power of different people. The consul can serve an unlimited amount of terms, but they must wait. And the key point of this is the Senate is going to be advising them on laws and actions, and if the consuls choose to disregard them, they then make their way back into the Senate when they are finished. They're going to keep those Senate seats. And so as a result, the consuls really have to weigh their decision-making along with what's going on in the Senate. Powers of the consul, veto power. In this case, it's vetoing each other. Remember, I said it's I deny in Latin. This is where it comes from. It comes from the consuls of ancient Rome. I deny. They also pass laws, but in this case, they are the ones who are making the laws. So while the President of the United States can sign a bill into law, it is the consuls who physically make the laws themselves in conjunction with the advisement of the Roman Senate. They are also co-heads of the armed forces. In a lot of cases, we see that manifested in the Roman Republic through kind of splitting the army in half. One consul is in charge of one half of the army, another consul is in charge of the other. Senate of the United States is known as the upper house of Congress, of the legislative branch. 100 senators, 2 per state, 50 states. Duh, math is hard. People of that state are who vote the senators into office. And those senators serve for 6 years. So there are less of them than, as we'll see, in the House of Representatives, and they serve for a longer amount of time, which means more power, hence the upper house. Powers of the U.S. Senate, they are the ones who are passing laws in conjunction with the House of Representatives. They can also overrule presidential veto, so a check on the president's power with a 2/3 supermajority. And they get to approve presidential appointments, various cabinet positions and things of that nature. The Senate for Rome, also considered to be the upper house because it is run by the patricians, 300 of them. We see a lot of times that these seats are passed down from family member to family member. It's only men who are serving in this. It's a very patriarchal society, comes from patricians. And these people, they hold on to those seats for life. That doesn't mean they have to die. It just means that they are not elected. They are selected when their time is up. And they resign or whatever. Powers of the Roman Senate, they get to advise the consuls on laws. They don't get to make the laws, but again, we talked about how the consuls have to weigh the ways in which they deal with the Senate. They also get to choose the new consuls, which obviously is a really important power to have. The House of Representatives, the lower house of the United States, 435 people. People in that congressional district are who vote for them, and those districts are determined by population for each state. This is the Virginia plan from the Great Compromise of the Constitutional Convention, as compared to the Senate, which is coming out of the New Jersey plan from the Constitutional Convention. 2 years at a time, so more of them and less time means less power. And so the House of Representatives is the lower of the two. They get to overrule presidential veto in much the same way the Senate can, 2/3 majority, supermajority. They also get to pass laws, and maybe it's only nerdiness that interests me, but the House of Representatives, any tax law has to originate in the House of Representatives. Congressional districts currently, this is 2019's congressional district for the state of Pennsylvania. You can see they're kind of all over the place. They're supposed to be of equal population, but it's left up to the states. They just have to be contiguous. They have to be connected in some way. You can see District 7 is wildly created down here. And this is the idea that as the redistricting occurs, both political parties will try to use that time to ensure that their party has the best chance to win the most houses, to win the most congressional districts. Plebeian Assembly, the lower house. So at first, as we learned yesterday, the 12 tables are created, the first codified system of laws for Rome. But as the plebeians start to ask for more and more equality, that then has to be scrapped. And so as that happens, the Plebeian Assembly is created, and there's no set number. It's based on all of those different groups like Etruscans and Latins and Greeks who made their way into Rome. And the people of their tribe are the ones who vote them in. They also serve for life. And it's important to note that, yes, the plebeians are the lower of the two classes, but that doesn't mean that they're slaves. These people aren't beggars on the streets. And in fact, the families who have seats in the Plebeian Assembly are your really well-to-do landowners, merchants. It's just that they're not considered the nobility. They're not the top of the top. Their powers, they can initially only pass laws for other plebeians, but that changes as they start to ask for more and more equality. And so eventually their laws apply to everybody. And eventually, it's at this point that the Plebeian Assembly gains a consul. So the two consuls no longer will just be selected by the Senate. Eventually, it evolves so that the Plebeian Assembly will select one and the Senate will select the other, giving that lower class a little bit more say. Supreme Court, judicial branch of the United States government, 9 of them at a time, 9 justices. The president nominates, but the Senate gets to confirm those appointments. They serve for life in the hopes that they won't be super political in nature. And their powers, the main one that we want to consider for this is judicial review. This is set up in the 1804 Supreme Court case, Marbury v. Madison. The details of the case don't matter, but what does matter is the decision afterwards and the language that is used by Chief Justice John Marshall that establishes the right of the Supreme Court when a case involving a law of the United States Constitution is brought before it, they have the ability to decide whether or not that law is constitutional. Does that law fall in line with the Constitution, or does it go against something specifically enumerated in the Constitution? How the Supreme Court reads that will determine if that law is confirmed as constitutional or if it will be struck down and deemed unconstitutional, meaning that it does not follow with the federal laws of the U.S. Constitution. The Roman counterpart to this is the Praetor. And the Praetor, there are 6 of them. They're selected by the Senate, so they're mostly patricians. If you think about it, the education that the patricians receive probably makes sense in this case. They're getting more of kind of the liberal arts versus the business and trade background that anyone in the business world is going to get. 1-year term, again, limiting the power of the Praetors to ensure that no one person can gain too much power. The problem is that's going to change in times of war. There's eventually a stipulation put in. You don't want to constantly be changing quarterbacks in the middle of a game. You don't want to be changing generals throughout the course of maybe a 5-year conflict where the plans are changing from time to time. So there are contingencies that are eventually put into place. Powers included the chief judges. As I mentioned earlier, they are the head generals. They are right underneath of the consuls, and they are the chief law officers, a position that is comparable to today's attorneys general. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. But eventually we're going to get to a point where we're going to use this information and do some analyzing by comparing and contrasting. Thanks very much for watching and have a great day.